show and re-listen to the show, fear not, I will pull out hopefully a bunch of the trades that I neglected to mention tonight, and we will work them into next week's show and the baseball talk there. But let us get to catching up on the Major League Baseball standings currently, and then let us get some long-awaited football talk in as fast as we can before we got to wrap up the show here tonight. All right, so catching us up now then on the standings, which should help make sense even more of, all set activity that we just discussed. We've got the Yankees still on top by 5.5 games. In the AL East, they're at 60 and 45. I believe they might have made a trade or two too. Again, I know there was a bunch I missed, but we've only got so much time this week. We'll devote more of next week's show to the football and baseball, right out of the gate. But this week, I can't help it. Lucha. Like, it's awesome. I can't help it. And you're welcome. If you watch it because of me, you're welcome. But anyway, back to baseball. So we got the Yankees there in first place in the East in the American League at 60 and 45. Blue Jays are 5.5 games back. So they're still very much in it. And as I've said countless times the last several weeks, they have one of the absolute best. Last I checked, they had the second best in all of baseball runs per game differential. Like on the season, they've scored more runs than they've given up total on the season. That differential, there's only one team in all of baseball that's better. So, like, I don't know what stat there is that, kind of alludes to how good a team is more than, we've scored this many more points all year than we've given up. Like, that's pretty telling usually. And that's why I pointed them out as the team to keep an eye on coming up to the trade deadline, because they were the most underachieving team based off of how much talent they had in baseball that was still in a position to contend for a playoff spot. That was the logic or the reasoning there, and it proved to play true. But so you've got the Blue Jays there in second at 56 and 52, 5.5 games back. We'll show how they play into the wild card picture in just a second. They are actually currently sitting in the second wild card spot after their most recent series with my Minnesota Twins, where they kicked the Twins' butt. The Twins are on a little bit of a schneid. But again, that's okay. Like I said, this ain't their year. Okay, stay the course. They're overachieving anyway. But so you've got the Blue Jays locked in now as the second wild card team. If the playoffs for baseball were to start today. They are followed. The Baltimore Orioles are only a half a game behind them at 55 and 52. You've got the Rays at 54 and 55, 8 games out of first, 2 games behind the Orioles there for third, but they chose to sell as they chose to buy here on the trade deadline. And then you've got the Red Sox still occupying last place at 47 and 60. Over to the AL Central, again the Royals, the rich got richer at the trade deadline. They are 63 and 42, firmly the best record in the American League. The Twins, they are still 2 games above 500 at 54 and 52, and they are, I believe, 2 games back of the Toronto Blue Jays now for the second and final wild card spot. We've got the White Sox and the Tigers both tied at 4 games under 500 at 51 and 55. And the Indians at 49 and 58, rounding out the bottom of that division. White Sox possibly getting a little bit of hot. Maybe they'll flirt with a wild card bid. Tigers definitely on the way down. Indians staying down, and Twins kind of fluctuating in the middle. And then out in the AL West, we've got the very competitive, very interesting AL West race between the Houston Astros and the Los Angeles Angels. That's been going back and forth the last couple weeks or months here now. Houston Astros again on top of that division by 2.5 games. They have a 2.5 game lead over the second place Los Angeles Angels. Houston Astros are 60 and 48. The Angels are 57 and 50. And the Angels, that makes them currently sitting in the first of the 2 wild card spots for the playoffs. However, they only have 1 game up on the second place team, and there are, by my counts, the Blue Jays, Orioles, Twins, and Blue Jays, Orioles, Twins, and Angels are all right in it for that, and possibly the Rangers as well, and maybe even the Tampa Bay Rays yet. But we got the Rangers there at 53 and 53, right at 500. Mariners 9 games under 500 at 50 and 59, and the Athletics are your second worst team in the American League at 48 and 61. All right, now closing up on the National League, and then finally getting to some football before we're out of showtime. In the NL West, we've got the Dodgers currently holding a 2-game lead over the San Francisco Giants in that division. Dodgers are 60 and 46. Giants are 58 and 48. So while the Giants are 2 games out of first place in their division, they are 3 games out behind the top wild card leader. They would still be the second wild card team at the moment. The San Francisco Giants would. You've got the Padres at 52 and 55, maybe hanging in there. I don't know. They've been one this whole year that I've been waiting on to finally get it going. I liked them going into the season, but they've just had a hard time. But you never know. Maybe this is it. Maybe they will make a wild card pusher before it's all said and done, or if nothing else, spoil someone else's season. But they're 3 games under 500 at 52 and 55. We got the Diamondbacks at 51 and 54, overachieving a little bit at 3 games under 500. That's sad to say. And then the Colorado Rockies in the basement of the West at 45 and 61. Out in the East, we've got a hot race for first, and then everybody else is kind of irrelevant. We've got the Mets currently in first place by 1 game at 57 and 50 over the Washington Nationals at 55 and 50. And then you've got the Braves 9 games back at 48 and 59, the Marlins at 43 and 64, and the Phillies at 42 and 65. Wow. Ding, 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 we have an obvious no-brainer winner for by far the worst division in all of baseball this year. Goes to the National League East. 3 teams that stink and 2 teams that are having a pretty decent race at it. And then, finally, in the NL Central, the best division in all of baseball, we've got the Cardinals with the best record in all of baseball at 67 and 39. And then you've got the Pirates at 61 and 44. They have the second best record in the National League, but they'd be a wild card team, and they're going to be a wild card team. We've also got the Cubs still in the wild card contention at 58 and 47. Man, that's 11 games above 500, and nobody's talking about the Cubs having a decent year. So Theo Epstein's got things turned around for the Cubs there. Just might not be their year this year, but boy, things are looking great if you're a Cubs fan. And then in the basements of that division, we got the Cincinnati Reds and the Milwaukee Brewers. All right, so there's your baseball standings report, and like I said, it definitely helps make sense of a lot of the trade activity that we discussed, and we will have more trade activity that I missed to discuss on next week's show, hopefully, so long as I can point out which ones I missed. All right, but we got a little bit of showtime left here, so let's get to some much-needed football talk. And then we'll wrap up the show with Balls Deep Thought of the Day. Again, you're listening to Balls Deep Sports Talk with me, your host, Scotty Ball, here on WNLMradio.com. Or also you might be listening via the TuneIn app, the Spreaker app, SoundCloud, or YouTube. All right, so our final meaty topic tonight is NFL football. Let's dive right into it with part 2 of, let's hold on. Let's dive right into it with this upcoming Sunday's Hall of Fame game. That is right, the first preseason game of the NFL season will be this upcoming Sunday, and it features my and maybe your Minnesota Vikings taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers in Canton, Ohio. The Hall of Fame induction ceremony, where we actually induct this year's Hall of Fame class, will be the night before. I'm pretty darn sure that is Saturday, the night before, and then the football game will be held on Sunday. I will not take up showtime this week talking about this year's Hall of Fame class. I felt that would be better saved for next week after all of the inductees have been inducted. And then I will give a little bit of my thoughts on the class. So we will save that for next week. We will get into part 2 immediately of my Vikings preseason preview, focusing on the depth chart for the Minnesota Vikings at the time. Right now where we're at in the preseason. Last week, I previewed the offense, went through it with a pretty fine-tooth comb. There were only a few backup depth position people that we didn't go over, but for the most part, we went over just about everybody that is going to end up making the team on the offensive side of the ball for the Vikings. So now that means this week we got to go over who's going to be making the team on the Vikings defense. As I mentioned earlier in the show, the Vikings had their first depth chart was released earlier in the week. Again, I don't know how official you want to say, you want to call this depth chart, but it is accurate. It may not be officially official, but it is fairly accurate. So that's where I've been going to this week for some of my information. I got that on Twitter from the Daily Norseman. Great name, Twitter handle for a Vikings fan. And if you follow Balls Deep Sports Talk on Twitter, at BDST Show, that's all you got to type in on Twitter, you'd already know this stuff. I retweet lots of sports news as well as my own thoughts and takes on different sports-related topics or live events. And again, just to recap, if you missed last week's offensive predictions, the main thing to take out of last week's offensive predictions is that Zach Line will not make the team. We will technically not have a fullback on our roster. That duty will be split between tight ends and traditional halfbacks, mainly Matt Asiata when you're looking for more of a dual threat backfield, and then you'll have your Rhett Ellison and your Chase Ford and maybe even Michael Pruitt, because we got 5 tight ends on the team and we want to keep at least 4 of them for sure. 5 maybe in Brandon Bostic, who we got from the Packers, and then look for us to keep 2 left guards, 2 centers, 1 right guard, that likely being Tyrus Thompson, maybe Mike Harris. We got the 2 tackles and the right tackles, Lodeholt, Clemmings, Khalil. Interesting to see if the big giant Babs, Babatunde Ayugababizi, however you say it, interesting to see if he'll actually end up making it or not. He could be one of the more well-known cuts for this team. But anyway, we're talking defense tonight. That's just catching you up. So let's get to the defensive side of the ball. Vikes were top half of the defense, top half ranked throughout the league last year in Mike Zimmer's first season. That's his MMO. He makes great defenses. No reason to believe that the defense shouldn't be as good as last year or better. We lost very few key pieces, and we added several talented pieces on that side of the ball. That was a big focus yet in our off-season acquisitions via free agency and the draft. So let's start up front with the defensive line. At left end, we've got Brian Robeson, who I think should be used more primarily in the run-stopping situations this season, as he has appeared to be losing somewhat of a step. We got second-year man Scott Crichton also at left end. He can fill in. I think if you're playing him at end, that would be more of a run-stopping situation. However, he can fill in nicely at defensive tackle and pass rushing situations as well. Then you've also got Caesar Rayford and Leon Mackey. Look for those to be cut victims. And then over on right defensive end, we've got Everson Griffin, who, he's our stud. Justin Tratau, he could be a cut because Daniel Hunter, our third-round draft pick, looks to be, the pass rusher of the future, hopefully for us. It is my expectations that it will start out as last year, with Robeson being the main guy on the left, Everson being the main guy on the right. At some point in time, I think they'll start out just spelling Griffin every once in a while with Hunter. As Hunter gets acclimated, then I believe you will see him slide to the left side of the line and actually replace Brian Robeson on the left in pass rushing situations, and let Robeson be more of a run stopper over there, or possibly just move Robeson entirely, as again, he's just not quite producing at his pay level.